Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Lights on Data show. I have a question for you. How ready is your company for AI? That's definitely the topic we're going to cover today.
And our lovely guest, Fern Halper, is going to tell us all about it. Fern, PhD, is Vice President and Senior Director of TDWI Research for Advanced Analytics. She is well known in the analytics community, having been published hundreds of times on data mining and information technology over the past 20 years. Fern is also co author of several dummies books on cloud computing and big data. She focuses on advanced analytics, including predictive analytics, text and social media analysis, machine learning, AI, cognitive computing, and big data analytics approaches. Welcome, Fern.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Very happy to have you.
So let's go right into it. And I know there's a lot of questions from the audience as well around AI readiness overall. And TDWI has an AI readiness assessment framework. Can you please tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. So at TDWI, we've been developing assessments, and we have a couple different types of assessments, readiness assessments. We also have maturity models. We've been doing this for the past 10 years, and the first one was on big data. And so if you go onto our website, you can see a number of assessments that are on our website. And each assessment, you go in, you take, you answer a bunch of questions, and you get a score. And
Yeah.
In the case of the AI readiness assessment, we have about 70 questions across 5 dimensions that we think are important for AI readiness. So that includes things like organizational readiness and data readiness and skills and tools readiness and operational readiness and governance readiness. So we think that these are important because it's not just a matter of having people with the right skills or buying the tools, although obviously, that's important. It's about all the other stuff around AI that's going to help you successfully get started. And so you go on, you take the assessment, and then you're going to get a report. You'll get a score, and the score will be out of 100, and that will put you on one of 5 different stages. Basically, you're either go from, either you're not ready or you're more than ready. And yeah, and so each dimension has a different score, so you could be more ready in the organizational category than the governance category, that sort of thing. So it's a good tool. We've gone in, we've assessed about 150 respondents so far, and the average score was a 62 out of 100, which isn't necessarily bad.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, so I was actually surprised. It was one of the higher assessment scores we've gotten in our assessments. Like typically we see the scores in the 50s, in terms of data governance or data quality or even analytics, in general. So people are really excited about AI, and they're definitely trying to get ready for it.
Oh, that's great to hear. And you're absolutely right. I think around data governance, a lot of companies, they tend to score around level 2 or so, the majority of them. But glad to hear. And I think AI is sort of getting data governance out there as well. And more companies are investing in data governance because of it. And I do want to tackle that governance piece that you mentioned, the dimension. But first, I have a question about one of the other dimensions that you mentioned, the data readiness. Can you please elaborate a little bit of the role of data readiness in AI initiatives?
Yeah, sure. So, we definitely know that AI makes use of diverse data. So a lot of organizations may have their structured data foundations somewhat in place, but we're also looking at things like text data and image data, voice data, especially as we move into generative AI, and even back with traditional AI, organizations wanted an enriched data set because you get better outcomes, with your models with that. But with generative AI, you're using different kinds of data, and the use cases that we see succeeding, some of them are with, say, text data. So for instance, analyzing and categorizing incident reports, or call center notes. Those are all text data, and people are saying, oh, we're analyzing our incident reports, we're analyzing, our call center reports. Modernize their architectures to support more modern analytics, the data for that modern analytics. And so in the data readiness dimension, we're looking at whether your data infrastructure is ready for AI. So we're going to ask questions about the data platforms that you're using. What about your data integrity? What about, can you support diverse data? What about, architectures, scalable architectures, those sorts of things. So what we see, though, is that these are some of the higher scores in the assessment, because that's what organizations have been focused on for a while. And in other surveys that we do, we see that data management and getting our data ready for AI, and by that they mean AI models, that's been a top priority in 2024. And so organizations have been moving to cloud platforms, they've been doing other things along those lines to try to get ready for AI.
Yeah. Well, what about the data catalog, business glossary, data dictionary? Would that fall under the skills and tools?
Or it's under skills and tools and also under data governance.
Right.
Yeah, for the data catalogs. And, we do see organizations starting to implement the data catalogs. I'd say it's between, in our other research, we've seen between 30 and 40% implementing data catalogs.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it's definitely a good way to start, to have an idea of what data you have in the organization. And a lot of them come up with some self-serve tools embedded that it's also classifying your data and doing a little bit of the legwork for you there.
Yeah, classifying, saying what data sensitive, some of these data catalog tools have a lot of good features for that.
Definitely. So the operational readiness piece, how does that influence the success of AI projects, you find?
I think it's a big deal, because you can get started building an AI model without operations readiness, but you're not going to succeed in putting models into production without it, right? And that's where the value is going to lie with AI. So we see a lot of organizations thinking about building the model, but they're not thinking about how they're actually going to put it into production. So that can obviously require new roles. And so that sort of gets into organizational readiness as well. But groups like ML Ops, right, the people who are responsible for making sure the model is going to work in production, versioning it, putting it into production, monitoring it in production, you have to, in some ways, think about AI as a piece of software. And there are going to be ways to deploy the models. Maybe you want to containerize the models, or you have to think about APIs. If you're going to put that model into production, you're going to want to integrate it probably with another system. So do you have the right APIs in place? Do you have the pipelines in place to ingest the data and bring it to the model for scoring? So once that model's in production, right, it's going to keep running. It needs the data to sort of come in and be scored. So, those are some of the questions we ask around operational readiness. It's people, it's also processes and technology around operational readiness.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm very passionate in general about change management. So my question would be, what changes or what preparations are typically necessary to support AI implementation?
Well, you definitely have to have the skills in place. I mean, the culture is obviously a big thing. So we see organizations succeeding when they have executives who are passionate about this also, and not just the executives sort of evangelizing it, but executives who are walking the walk and talking the talk. And, so they're out there and they're using analytics in their day-to-day life, and they're also, not only doing that, but they're sort of making it a cultural change, in their organization. And that means also that someone like the CDO or CDAO, they're actually part of the C-suite, right? So that we see actually statistically significant, if organizations have someone in the C-suite who is on the data or analytics side, they're more likely to have success with it. So, and then not only that, but that CDO or someone like a CDO, they may also be responsible for data literacy in the organization and, sort of helping make it happen. And, we see these data literacy enablement teams, I mean, call them what you want to call them, but organizations have them. Sometimes they report to the CDO, and the team's responsible for making an assessment of what the skills are needed and what roles are needed, and making this all happen. And then when they roll it out, I was talking to a company not that long ago who was talking about how they actually did a whole marketing campaign around the fact that they were bringing this AI out, and they produced videos to explain to people who might be on the manufacturing floor just how important AI could be and how they could be using it. And they built excitement. It got people excited to actually do this, and it just built on itself as people saw that there was value. It was just a virtuous circle.
Yes, I agree. I saw, videos and learning paths existing in organizations, but people just simply not using them, not making use of them at all, just because that desire and that excitement was not there, and it was not clear what's in it for them to actually do it. So I loved the examples that you gave. It's very useful to involve marketing teams and people who can build that excitement as well.
Yeah. And I like that you point out the data literacy overall. I think there's two main reasons why this can be a barrier to AI adoption if it's not properly implemented. One, people are scared of the unknown overall. And even if you're aware that, okay, well, there's all these AI capabilities, tools, services that I could use, if I'm not really aware of the ins and outs of them and risks that come with them, you don't know what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, who's responsible for the outputs, the whole process and everything in between. And yeah, those are definitely very important. So what are some of the effective strategies for upskilling that existing talent within organizations?
Or attracting them.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And we definitely see that organizations want to upskill, not only the data analysts. Oftentimes they want to become data scientists, and depending sort of where the company is, like physically located, they may have a hard time of, getting new people in. So they want to try to upskill them. And of course, they can send them to training. We have TDWI, for example, has data science boot camps, for instance, a 3-day boot camp that people can go to. We have faculty who teach people how to do data science, learn Python, learn, different algorithms. We offer them in person. We offer them live and virtual, so live, but you're virtual and online. Vendors obviously provide training. There are online courses available. There are certificates, so what this data literacy team often does is they actually, they'll do an assessment, and then they'll put a plan together for different roles for different people. And then the good data literacy teams actually monitor their progress. Sometimes they'll mandate training for certain people in the organization. Hopefully the people are on board with that. And they'll have either, some of them have portals, where you can go in and sort of monitor your progress. And, there's different online courses or examples of where you can actually go to get the training that you need. Some people have their own budgets. So, each person has a certain budget where they can go out and get the training that they need. But also we've seen organizations implement mentorship programs, and that can help also upskill the people. So, those are some of the ways that organizations are doing it. But I will say that in the AI readiness assessment, there were some lower scores sort of in the skills readiness category, which isn't surprising. That's always like one of the biggest problems that organizations have.
Yeah, and Lindsay here put a link to the upcoming events from TDWI. There's a lot of training available, of course, a lot of courses, and I know there's the upcoming TDWI Modern Data Leader Summit in San Diego, with the focus on data governance. That's August 5th to August 7th. So, and if you can make your way to San Diego in a couple weeks, then there's one upcoming in October as well, October 21st, 23rd. And that one has a focus on analytics, and it's in Orlando. So there are a lot of things, and these are occurring every year too.
Yes, yeah, a number of times a year. Plus, there's TDWI seminars happening all the time online. So,
Yeah,
that's another avenue.
and boot camps and webinars and everything.
Yes, we do many webinars at TDWI, for sure.
Yeah,
We'll introduce, so we as analysts will talk about the trends that we're seeing and some best practices that we think are important for research, for people to know. But we also have experts online that we'll talk to and get their input about the different tools and methodologies and what they think works. We'll do skill up webinars where we'll actually see solutions in out there. So, for example, if a vendor, we're doing one this week, where a vendor will have an augmented AI solution, which we didn't talk about, as a way to skill up also, because, there are all of these tools out there now that have AI basically infused into the tool. So when the person logs in, it's not like they have to know how to do a decision tree or some other type of model. Theoretically up pops the what they should be looking at. I would still say if you're going to use a tool like that, that's great. And all of the tools now seem to have AI infused in them in one way or another, but you still need to be literate. You still have to critically think. You have to understand the business. You have to understand the data, all of that. So, but that's certainly another avenue.
Definitely. No, thank you. Yeah, thanks for offering all those resources for all of us to learn from. I mentioned in the beginning that I do want to cover more on the governance piece, the governance readiness. And I want to get our facts straight first. Can you please explain to us what the difference is between AI governance, data governance, and analytics governance?
Sure. So to me, data governance is ensuring that business data remains fit for use, so it's going to focus on the processes and policies and rules for achieving specific goals for managed data and building trust in that data. So it's data focused. And then BI governance or analytics governance, it's similar. You could use the same beginning of the definition about strategies and processes and tools, but you want to make sure it ensures that the outputs of BI are trustworthy and accessible only to authorized individuals and, be in full compliance with regulations. So, an example might be a dashboard or a report needs to be, maybe it's determined that it should be documented and you can track the lineage to understand if something's changed, if the organization is looking at that dashboard. And as part of that, the dashboards and the reports are version controlled and it can only be accessed by those who are allowed to do so. And maybe the same principles then hold for AI, but now on top of having to govern AI models like a piece of software, you also have to be concerned with things like bias and fairness, that all of that's coming into responsible AI, which you could also argue should also be in regular analytics governance. But, with AI governance, you're also thinking about versioning the models, documenting the models, and, when you put them into production, being able to monitor them. So you really need all three. And what we see is that organizations make data governance a priority, but not necessarily analytics or AI governance. The whole thing's a journey. So the reality is they're going to start with data governance because that's what organizations have started with. It's important because you have to make sure your data is governed, if you're going to do any analytics. So you're going to start with that. And I think that in some organizations, then the analytics or AI governance starts to become part of the data governance process. But then as it gets bigger, they realize maybe they have to separate the two. They can work closely together, but maybe the data steward can also be the analytics steward, like that. It doesn't necessarily make sense to do. It's really evolving. The analytics and AI governance, I'd say, is very new. Of course, we're hearing a lot more about responsible AI because of all of the pitfalls around generative AI with hallucinations and, data leakage and everything else. So that thankfully has become, people are interested in that. And, we're definitely seeing that the move to generative AI has made some organizations at least more aware of the need for responsible AI, but the reality is that they're focused on data governance, and you know what? That's fine. That's fine. It's good to be focused on at least something.
I
So
agree.
yeah.
So, based on your research, Fern, and your industry insight, what are the most common challenges that organizations face in implementing effective governance? And are these challenges different from industry to industry, from small organizations to larger organizations?
Yeah, I think that the challenges with governance really, it includes getting the funding for it past the compliance part. What we see when we do data governance maturity models is that organizations are pretty good with the compliance, for the most part. It's just sort of the trust aspects they have issues with. People still don't necessarily trust the quality of their data. And if you want to move to self-service, democratize analytics, if you don't have good quality data, business users are just going to turn away from that. So the challenges are things like getting stakeholder buy-in and making it not seem like a chore. That's a big challenge. And there are also challenges with governing massive amounts of data and new data types. I think that organizations haven't even necessarily started governing text data. For instance, they're thinking about what we see in our research and in these data governance maturity models is that they're governing the structured data, but they're not necessarily governing the unstructured data. They don't even necessarily know what that would look like, and it varies from company to company. What does data quality look like for my text data? How do I figure that out?
And that's a huge basis for AI products too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So what are you feeding into these AI models? If are you at least trusting the source where it's coming from? What's happening with some tools that can actually help with making sure that data has higher quality. I haven't seen that many tools. There are some, that are starting to deal with text data and other types of data. And then with self-service, you're going to have to balance empowering business users with controlling. So it's a cultural thing. And that's why I was saying that the TDWI data governance maturity model, the average score was a 58. So, and again, it was getting those. People don't understand that you need to put data governance in place at the same time you're building your strategy for data management, I think. And a lot of times it's an afterthought, and it can't be an afterthought because otherwise you're going to run into problems. That's my view.
That's very true. And like you mentioned earlier, that a lot of organizations are doing okay with that regulatory compliance, I mean, for the most part. And so they're mostly looking at the stick as the incentive and not the carrot. And I feel like the carrot can actually bring so many more benefits than implementing it because you have to. But anyway, do you have any practical recommendations or best practices for overcoming some of these governance challenges that you mentioned?
I think it's really important to assess your enterprise's requirements for comprehensive data governance. It varies from company to company. So do some sort of assessment in the first place. Also assess where you are now as part of that. So what is your maturity level? You can use our data governance maturity model. There's a new one that's coming out soon. And that would just give you sort of a broad brushstroke sort of where you are at this point. I think it's also going to be important to realize that you need to build a sustainable enterprise-wide data governance practice. And that means executive sponsorship. So you need to advocate for creating a coordinating council, some sort of team. I mean, don't make it heavyweight. It can't be heavyweight because then it's going to feel like a burden. You have to look at the tools on the market. You were talking about data catalogs. We've seen organizations get a lot of benefit from that. I just finished a survey for a recent best practices report on observability and monitoring. And we're seeing that a lot of organizations are putting this data catalog in place, and it's helping. Obviously, you also have to put metrics in place and the right metrics in place, because a lot of times organizations don't measure governance, and I think that they have to measure governance. So I think that's another important sort of practical consideration. And organizations are able to get data stewards on board, because people do get passionate about their data. I think that maybe with the advent of data products, a lot of organizations are moving to this data product model, which I think, if data is a product, you have to make sure that people are satisfied with the product. And so I think that may also help move data governance along, at least on the satisfaction, data integrity, data trust side. Because I've been surprised at how many organizations are actually starting to implement this model. And it may be as looking at their data sets, they may not be looking at the whole sort of data product model as a derived asset from data and thinking about what a product could be. But, hey, that's good. Start with the data sets and, think about how the rest of the organization is using it and get the stakeholder. Then you have stakeholders involved, and the stakeholders are on the business side, and you need the business stakeholders. So it all, may help to feed itself. Those are some ideas. You probably have others.
Sure. Yeah, those are great ideas, Fern. Thank you.
You already mentioned some, but what trends do you foresee, Fern?
Well, yeah, there's definitely the data products trend. There's definitely the augmented tooling trend. So that's a big one. And it was saying the augmented tool, we talked about sort of the data catalogs and how they're augmented. There's other pipelines are augmented, sort of every tool and platform you can think of is becoming augmented. I'm very interested in the use of tooling to help with responsible AI, because I just saw, I've been thinking about this whole diversity of data thing, as well as you use generative AI, what tools are in place to actually mitigate bias and think about fairness. And it was interesting the other day, I just saw that the John Snow Labs, I think they're pretty much on the healthcare side, but they released this Lang test, so Lang chain, but like some Lang test toolkit that's now easier to use. It may have some sort of natural language interface for it, but it's sort of a unit testing tool that can actually help you determine if your data is biased. I just thought, so I think we're going to see more tools like that, and not only these augmented tools for data governance, but also tools that are going to help, on the responsible AI governance side. So it'll be exciting. I mean, the good news is that people realize how important data governance is, and they're going to only realize it more and more as more regulations start coming down the pike, which we're definitely seeing.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. We'll see.
It's inevitable, though. No?
Do you have any closing thoughts on how organizations can prepare themselves to adapt to some of these trends that you're foreseeing?
Yeah, I think they have to educate themselves. There's a lot of good frameworks out there. There's like the NIST framework on the AI side. Some of the big consulting companies have good AI frameworks. There's ISO frameworks for systems, and some of them cost money. You have to purchase them and download them, but they're pretty comprehensive. At least the NIST did one recently on generative AI. I thought it was pretty comprehensive, and we see organizations actually looking at all the different frameworks that are out there, and then they pick which one works for them, not which one, but like which parts of them work for them, and then they put their own framework together, sort of using all of these other pieces, which I think is a really good idea.
Yeah, I think a lot of them do tend to tailor them. Of course, I think the disadvantage with tailoring them is that you can't really then compare your scores with another organization, just because you're not comparing apples to apples. But you got to do whatever is a best fit for your organization too. So wins and wins.
At our San Diego Modern Data Leader Summit, we're going to have a couple of different case studies from Suncor and some banks and some other companies talking about how they're implementing modern data governance. So I'm sure it will all be different. Each one of there'll be the same, some principles running through them, but I'm going to be curious to also see how much they talk about data products. One of our Best Practice Award winners, Emirates Air, they won our Best Practice Award last year for data management. They were in this data product mode, so it'll be interesting to see how many other companies start picking that up.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I know there'll be a lot of amazing takeaways, and I know there's so much more to unpack on this topic, but I know we're also coming to an end. So I do hope we can get you back on the show to continue the conversation or talk about anything around modern data governance and modern data analytics. You have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge, and thank you so much for sharing some of it today. And thanks again for putting the lights on AI readiness with us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.